Hi everyone, it's Shari Carroll for simonsaysstamp.com, and I have a card for you using the add-ons from the December My Monthly Hero Kit. The items I'll be working with for my card are the birthday celebration stamps, and they also have some matching dies, but I'm mainly working with the greeting from the stamp set. Also, there are the Martini Fancy dies, and this is really super cute. You can add all these elements together for a fun card. And finally, I'll be using the Celebration Words stencil, and this has a lot of fun words, a really cute font, and I'm going to put my hand behind so you can see all the words. Great for any occasion. I'm going to start off with the stencil and some watercolor paper to create a background, and I'm using some Peacock Feathers ink from Tim Holtz Distress Ink line, and I'm just using the little cube and just kind of just spreading the ink around just a little bit. If you notice, I'm working on the back side of the stencil so that when I flip it over, I can put the ink down on the paper. I've just added a little bit of the peeled paint ink as well, and now I'll be spritzing this with some water using my mini mister. So I want to add enough water until I can see the ink start to ball up. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to go ahead and wipe around the edges with a paper towel, and just to make sure I don't have any hard edges of the ink pads, I want everything to look soft and rounded out. Okay, so I'm going to lift this up, and I'll go ahead and clean off the excess ink from my craft sheet here and a little bit from the other side of the stencil. So when I'm ready, I'm going to go ahead and line this up onto my watercolor paper, and I am working on the smooth side of the Tim Holtz Distress watercolor paper. So I've laid that down. Now I'm just pressing a paper towel on top and just moving my hands around and pressing that stencil in, and it's soaking up the ink that is coming out through those words. And when I'm done pressing, I can lift this up, and now I have the words with color around them. So I'm going to go ahead and blot up a little bit some of the puddles of ink because I want this to be a really faded, faint background. Now I'm ready to work with my martini, and I have the dies here, and I figured out that this die fits in the center really perfect. Enough for me to make a really mini shaker card. So what I'm going to do first is add some of my adhesive around those edges of this martini glass. You can cut them together or cut them separately. I cut them separately. So now I'm putting on a piece of acetate onto that little martini glass and going ahead and clipping off the excess with my scissors. I have trimmed up some of my foam tape in real skinny little pieces so that I can add another piece of acetate on the top. So what'll happen is I'll be sandwiching my sequins in between the two pieces of acetate. But first I want to go ahead and use my anti-static brush here, and this kind of helps take off the adhesive on the sides of that foam tape so that your sequins don't stick to the edges. So I'm going to put in some flat sequins here because I only have one layer of my foam tape. If I were to have some of the rounded type sequins, I would probably do a double layer. So next I want to just take off the top piece of my adhesive backing, and I have one little sequins that's trying to stick to that adhesive. And now I'm going to go ahead and lay my piece of acetate on top. And once I have that lined up, I can go ahead and press that down. And now I can reach under that acetate and go ahead and peel off the rest of the backings, and I have my little sequins inside the martini glass. At this point I'm starting to put things together. I have my panel here, and I've also die cut a cherry and also a lime, and I have painted these with my distress paint. So for the cherry I've used the festive berries and fired brick, and then I've also used the peeled paint for the stem and the lime. Right now I'm adding some peacock feathers to my acrylic block, and I'm going to be painting this. I'm sure it's supposed to be an olive, but I'm just going to make it like a blueberry, something kind of fruity. So I'm using my peeled paint. I have a little bit of water off to the side, just dipping my paintbrush into the water and then grabbing some of the paint that's on the block and then just adding it to the paper. I like to let it just soak in, and to get a little bit of variance, I'll do one edge a little bit darker than the other side, and then it gives me a little more depth and character. I'm using my mini MISTI so that I can stamp my greeting onto my card. I didn't do this before I mounted everything, so I have everything lined up. I've looked to see how my stamp would line up onto my card, so I've inked that up with some intense black ink, and there I'm stamping it right onto that front panel. I want my greeting to stand out just a little bit more, so I'm going to ink again. And since the Misty is a stamp positioner, I can go ahead and be assured that everything will be lined up just perfectly. I'll go ahead and press that down again, and now it's really nice and dark. I've added some double-sided tape to the back of my martini glass, and I'm just peeling off the backing there. I was able to cut it really thin because it does come in a roll, and you can go ahead and cut that. And then a little piece of foam on the bottom. So next I'm just going to go ahead and line this up right next to my greeting. I'm not going to press this down really hard because I do want to slide in my fruit behind it. So now I have my lime in place and also the straw with my blueberry, and I can turn this around and then I can put some adhesive underneath. And for this, I'm just going to lift this up slightly and go ahead and put some of my tape runner underneath, and then I can go ahead and press everything down. And finally, I can add my cherry on top, and I have put a little bit of foam adhesive on the back as well. So here is my little mini martini shaker card with sequins that look like either bubbles or ice. Here's a better shot of how the card turned out. All the colors are really adorable. I really love how the distress inks work as a watercolor. And I really like the idea of putting the sequins between two pieces of acetate. So I hope I've inspired you to use the add-ons from the December My Monthly Hero kit. And as always, thanks so much for watching.